The history of paper will tell us all about human relationships. This is really the key element. During the medieval period, there was a constant need and demand for writing material. We had parchment, but animal skins is to a certain extent finite because it depends on how many cattle and sheep you have. When paper arrives, it adds and it contributes extensively to this need for writing material. We often talk about paper in book production, so paper as a tool to communicate knowledge and learning, but paper initially was a tool used for letters. Paper had a huge advantage because it was light. A letter from London would reach Lucca or Tuscany in 14, sometimes 10 days, and is actually faster than a letter that I sent now from here. Watermarks have been traditionally catalogued according to their iconography. So, for example, you can have a bishop hat, you can have a lion, you can have dragon, and that is the first way by which you can catalogue watermarks. It is known that medieval paper was made with two molds at the same time, and quite often those two molds would have identical watermarks. But the concept of what is identical in the medieval period, when everything was handmade, is probably a little bit more of a loose idea. So we can say, for example, that we have two dragons, but if you then look very closely, you can actually see that those two dragons might have the tail a little bit more swifting or going to the right, or you could have the claws a little bit more turned to the right or to the left. And these are all details that are really easy to spot, and this is how you spot twins. And when you spot the twins, you have a complete paper stock. And this is what, for me, is one of the most important things when we study the technology of paper, identifying paper stocks rather than identifying watermarks. When we started talking about imaging, which was back in 2016 and 17, we tried different ways of capturing the fingerprint of the paper manuscripts, and the technology wasn't quite right. It wasn't quite right because it would capture the image, but there was no way of manipulating the image in such a way that we could remove, for example, the ink, so that the watermark and the key elements of the mold would be easily visible. But with this new equipment and the use of multispectral imaging, there is an opportunity there to remove layer of data. So an image becomes a datum, and when you have lots of data together, you can start manipulating that data. The new equipment that Cambridge University Library has just acquired is a powerful technology because it's enabled us to really see through the fingerprint of the paper. And therefore, you can start thinking about carrying out those automated experiments, but more importantly, it enables you to compare watermarks and the full paper stock with precision. And this is really what matters. So having professional photography that enables you to compare paper stock so that you can trace the paper stock and so that you can actually build what I call the genome of paper stock in medieval England.